In this resource, we'll see how to approach this week's assignment. Before viewing this resource, make sure you saw the other video on Krita Basics. To start this week, we have the 2 drawings left over from that resource, and I'm also going to pull out the layers panel because we're going to be using layers a lot. In addition, I'm going to make 2 changes to the interface by increasing the icon size and nudging over the layers inside the layer groups more. Just a reminder, we're using layer groups. The purpose of layer groups is to keep every object draggable like one single object. And inside of each layer group are layers as needed for sketching, inking, coloring, and shading. So let's go through the cycle of how to draw in Krita a few times to show some different tools and various ways of going about it. The first thing I like to do is create a new layer for my sketch and begin sketching on it. When I'm done with my sketch, I create another layer for inking, and then I group them together. And that's how I name my layer group. For this instance, I'm going to create a layer group for the cloud. For inking, I'm going to use Ink Brush 25, change my color to black, and put smoothing onto weighted. I am drawing with my tablet, so it's going to look super smooth. If I was drawing with my mouse, I'd have smoothing on stabilizer right now, perhaps. And still another option is to draw circles and then erase them. One tip I found super helpful: when you're drawing 2 lines that intersect, it's incredibly hard to erase them so they match up exactly. So one thing that I do is temporarily create a new layer, and then I draw the line on that new layer, and that way when I erase, I can erase part of the line on the above layer so it overlaps correctly, and then I can merge the layers back together by right-clicking them and choosing merge the layer down with the one below it. And then I'll just continue like this until I have the entire cloud inked. And from the last resource, we saw how to use the paint bucket to affect all layers, so I can create a new color layer now, but use the line layers to fill the color in with. Just be sure on the paint bucket you have those settings set correctly to include all layers, and also grow the paint bucket by 2 pixels. Since the paint bucket is set to consider all layers, you need to also hide your rough sketch. Otherwise, it will try to follow the lines of the rough sketch instead of the inked lines. So if you just hide that layer first, it'll work correctly. Oftentimes, I just pause and toggle the layers on and off to make sure I've drawn on the correct layers. I also am sure to lock them if I'm finished with them. With the color blocked in, it's time to start adding some shadows and highlights. I'm going to paint directly onto the color layer, so in this case I just need to remember to click Preserve Alpha at the top. This will make sure I can't color out of the lines, or can't color out of the colored area that's light gray right now. And over maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to take my brush. I've chosen a really rough, bristly dry brush, and I've taken a little bit of a darker gray, and I'm just going through and lightly knocking in some shadows in darker areas. When I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and grab the Move tool and select the cloud layer group, and I'm going to resize it and move it up in the corner. Now just be careful, this is a bitmap drawing program, so when you make something smaller, you are reducing the quality of the image. But as long as your drawings are in layer groups, you don't have to resize them all to fit. You can have each image take up the entire screen if you'd like. Since Krita is a bitmap program, we can import images as well. So I've got some high-res images saved. One thing I like to do when I animate is drop in backgrounds sometimes. It's just more interesting, instead of a white plain background, to have something like graph paper, or in this case a paper bag. And you can add the image to your canvas just by dragging it on, and it will ask you how you want to add it. I just add it as a new layer, and then I can use that transform tool to resize the image and move it around on the canvas. When you import images this way, they're going to become part of Krita. So the entire image is now saved in the Krita file. So just be careful not to bring in images that are like 5 gigabytes large, because it'll make Krita a huge file. And instead of the paper bag, I think I'm going to go with some lined paper. The image reference tool is a great tool to use if you want to bring in an image to look at while you draw. After selecting this tool, head over to the tool options and click the plus button to grab an image to import as a reference. Reference layers are stored on a special layer that are always on top of the other layers. This layer isn't seen in the layers panel. It just sort of hangs out on top. And if you select one of the references, you can adjust its opacity, its saturation, you can control whether you constrain proportions or not, and you can also control whether the image is embedded or linked to. If you choose embedded, the image will be a part of the file in a similar way that it was when we imported the backgrounds. But if you create a link to an image, it'll just use the file as a reference and not store it and make the Krita file bigger. But if you send the file and you don't include the image that you referred to, it won't show up in your project. Just like our other drawings, we're going to start the Pokemon ball with a sketch layer. I'm going to immediately turn it into a group, and so I can name it Pokemon ball. But when I start drawing, notice my pencil lines come out behind the reference image. To fix this, I need to select the image reference tool again, and then select the image reference and adjust its opacity so I can see through it. Then I can create a rough sketch. An even easier way to go about this would be to use shapes and lines. In order to get the circles to come out in the right spot, I try to visualize where the top and the left edge of the circle is, and I start drawing the circle there with my circle tool. That way, when I'm done drawing, it will line up with the circle that's on the reference image. And since this is just a sketch layer, I'm going to leave a lot of those lines there and just use simple lines and circles to map out where these shapes are. Then I'm going to create another layer for inking, and I'm also going to use the geometry tools to choose an ink brush and just draw them again, this time with much more accuracy. And I'm also setting each drawing up or each shape as needed on its own layer, so that way the lines are easier to erase separately. So for instance, these two straight lines coming up are going to be on their own layer. That way I can erase them when they overlap the circles, and I don't have to erase them very accurately if it was on one layer and I was trying to clean up that edge. Adding color is as simple as a new layer and dropping it in, but you'll see it does consider all layers. So we have to hide that background image. And then the layers fill in as expected. With the basic colors blocked in, I can now start adding some shadows and highlights. So I'm going to move the image over to the right so I can look at both my drawing and the image at the same time. In this drawing, I'm going to use a separate layer for the shadow. A couple of reasons. First of all, I like to just free paint where the shadow should be. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint with a neutral color, like a gray or a black, because the shadow is going to span across more than one color. And if we set inherent alpha, the blending mode to luminosity, and knock that opacity down, we'll see that this neutral shadow now makes the reds darker and the whites darker. Had we have painted with a light red, everything would have looked pink. So using a gray in this way is incredibly helpful sometimes. And for the highlight, we'll just add another separate layer and do something similar with a pure white color, an airbrush, and knocking down opacity a little bit. And as I get warmed up, I think I'm going to throw on a shadow here too, and just use a simple brush on an additional layer to create some of those shadows in the ground, getting a little bit darker as I get closer to the Pokemon ball. Cool, so that's drawing number 4. I'm going to resize that, just remembering that when I do reduce the size, I am losing quality, but since I'm just playing around right now, I'm not so worried about it. Let's create another object, and I'm going to use the Assistant tool for this one. By clicking once, you create one of the vanishing points. By clicking a second time, you create the other vanishing point, and by moving the mouse and clicking a third time, you set the grid. Once you select any drawing tool after that, you get these little helper lines that come out from the vanishing points to help tell where your cursor is. Here, I'm going to use the line tool to connect lines together in a way that forms a 3D block. And as far as color, I really want to see what Krita can do. So this time, I think I just might add a color layer, but I'm just going to pick the pencil and try to draw the heck out of it and see how this program really works. The part you're watching now probably took me about 20 to 25 minutes. I started off by lightly sketching in the outline with a light pencil. I spent a lot of time adjusting opacity. Again, that makes the pencil seem weaker or lighter when you draw. This is really handy if you're drawing with your mouse. If you're drawing with your pen, you can just be very gentle and very careful when you draw. I'm also using the eraser at the same time. A lot of the time, if I notice my lines are getting a little too dark, I'll switch to eraser mode and lighten them up a little bit. As for shading, I've identified my light source as being on the top right, so I will start shading with the darkest side on the bottom left, the medium side on the right, and the lightest side with the light reflecting off it on the top. So when I sketch or when I shade, I'm really thinking about how light should each surface be compared to the other ones. And just like I would with a pencil on rough paper, going over these areas multiple times helps fill them in and really define that deeper value instead of just coloring it one solid color. And I like the way things look spread out on my little sheet of paper, so I'm going to shrink this down and kind of bump this over with the rest as well. Krita also has the ability to mirror your drawing. You can enable vertical and horizontal mirroring in the top menu. When enabled, you'll see a dotted line appear on the canvas, and all you have to do is draw on one side of the dotted line. So here I'm going to create a new layer and start making a circle, a heart, and a star. Using the Move tool, I'll push those off to the side and enable horizontal mirroring at the same time. Drawing like this requires my brain to really think hard, but all you have to do is draw in one quadrant and the other three quadrants appear. I like using mirroring a lot during the rough sketch phase to make sure that things are lined up. For instance, if I want the eyes to be the same size or things to be exactly symmetrical, it's a very helpful tool. So far in these resources, we've drawn 5 things together, and I just sketched out another 5 possible ideas using a variety of tools and methods. For my final project this week, or my final drawing, I really wanted to see what I could do and what Krita is capable of. So I picked a painting by Cezanne to sort of do a study after. So I'm going to bring it into Krita as a reference image that's linked. That way it's not stored in the file, but when I submit my assignment, I'm going to have to remember to submit this image as well. Once the reference image is loaded, I'm going to create a rough sketch layer and put this into a layer group, and I'm going to just draw my rough sketch. This is going to be my final sketch this week. This sketch should only happen after you've practiced and you're really familiar with how to draw in Krita and very comfortable. I'm feeling at that point right now, so I'm going to go ahead and create layers for things. And like a painting, I'm going to sort of move back forwards. So I'll start with a layer called like the wall, for instance, and then add a layer for the table, and then the plate, and then each piece of fruit, and so on. One of my goals in choosing an impressionist painter was to try to really achieve these brush strokes. So what you're going to see here is me again working backwards, forwards, and just sort of blocking in some of the main colors, and then using Control to quickly grab the eyedropper to select colors directly from my reference. And then I'm sort of going back with a very rough painting brush and patching in these areas of color roughly at first before I go back and sort of smooth them. So you can see I've been making some progress on the table and the background, but what I had to do is I went online and found a new set of brushes called Impressionist brushes. So you'll see up here on the top right in my brush menu, there's some orange brushes in here. I was able to download those, and I'll provide those as a link in this week's resources. They just did a really good job of sort of when you paint, not painting a flat color. They were sort of grabbing other colors sort of around it, and it made it really easy to blend and make it look smooth while keeping the texture of the paint instead of just making it look blurry or smudged. And one way I'm working that I find very easy in Krita is to make a layer for each piece of the painting. So there's a layer for the plate, each piece of fruit, again the background, and the table as well. This allows me to sort of block in the color very quickly and then go back through with Preserve Alpha on or Inherit Alpha checked off on a shading layer and really sort of force my brush to follow the lines in those areas. Since it's Impressionism, I find myself turning that off once in a while to kind of free draw and make the edges a little rougher and really blend those colors without being restricted to being stuck in the lines. This whole drawing probably took me about an hour. and it was really challenging for me. I'm really happy with I did it. Even if it didn't come out right, it still was a great experience, and I'm much more comfortable painting this week than I was before. When you do your homework assignment, it's not required that you pick a master to copy from. It's not even required that our images look like their masterworks. Okay, I assume that everyone is going to work at their own ability. This includes challenging yourself and not just scribbling stuff out to say you got the assignment done. You're actually really trying to draw things. You're really trying things that interest you, and you're trying to learn the skills this week that we learned from the resources so we can draw quicker and animate in the next few weeks. So in this resource, we went over how to start this week's assignment, including drawing different things in different ways. I would highly encourage you to do the same and really focus on finding your workflow. What way is going to work best for you to draw? How are you going to sketch? What are your sketching brushes? How are you going to ink? Which brushes are you going to use for that? And how do you prefer coloring? You might see other videos, you might see other methods, and you might come up with your own way. It's just important this week that we find those ways and start getting really comfortable drawing in Krita. So next week, it's not super confusing. That's it for now. Please be sure to check out the assignment description and rubric for exactly what's expected in this week's assignment. Happy drawing, everybody. Have a great week.